I wasn't sure I was going to take a call on this when I came down here, but listening to the debate, I feel that I can't not. And I do want to talk about the title, Mr Chair, and I think the two words that really matter most are telecommunications and development. And frankly, I don't care whether we call this thing a levy or a tax or a cohar or a Danegeld or anything else. What matters is that it is money that gets paid, and I agree absolutely with Minister Adams that it should be the telcos that pay it, because it's actually the telcos since privatisation who are responsible for the fact that we haven't had development in telecommunications in the rural areas. And I'm going to put this from a slightly different perspective from some of my Labor colleagues, Mr Chair, because I actually live in the boondocks. I live in a cell phone black spot. It's called rural New Zealand. There is no coverage. I've got maybe one little sweet spot up by my garage where I can get 2 bars if I kind of hold the phone up there, if sometimes on a good day if it's not raining. In the house, no chance. And, you know, this is 40 minutes north of downtown Christchurch, so it's hardly the middle of nowhere. We moved up to Canterbury about 6 years ago from Central Otago. The previous 2 years, we'd been enjoying blisteringly fast broadband speeds of about 2 meg, and that was because they'd upgraded the cabinet round the corner, finally. Prior to that, we were on dial-up. And if you wanted to look at a picture, you just sort of set the thing going and then went to bed. And in the morning, your 14 kilobyte photo would come through, if you were lucky, if the thing had logged off through the night. You know, going back a little bit further in time, when I was growing up, I remember a telephone was a black Bakelite thing on the wall with a crank handle. And to use it, you'd pick the handle up, crank the handle, and the nice lady on the other end would say, "Number, please." And so you'd say who you wanted to talk to. And being a little boy at the time, and of course, the nice lady in the phone exchange was in the post office, and she could see the town. She knew everybody, and she knew who I was probably talking about. And she would say, "Do you want to talk to Paul?" And I'd say, "Yes." And she'd say, "I've just seen him go out." And that was the way rural New Zealand was. And actually, in internet terms, in broadband terms, most of rural New Zealand is still like that. Most of rural New Zealand would just like to have broadband. So in 2009, we moved to Canterbury, and Telecom said, "Yes, that's fine, we can hook you up to broadband. We've checked your lines, they're all fine." They sent us a nice free modem, and that was all going to be good. And then they came to hook it up and said, "Oh, actually, no, your line can't take this." And we said, "Oh, well, when's that going to happen?" And they said, "Well, we're looking at upgrading the exchange maybe in about 2012. "Oh, OK, what do we do till then?" And a couple of the Labor members mentioned companies like Farmside, and in those days they were pretty much one of the only alternatives. They were doing mostly satellite in those days. And so we looked into that, and we looked into radio, and ended up getting a radio link with a company out of Christchurch, and we were on the outer edge of where they could reach, because they were slightly cheaper and slightly faster than the terribly slow speeds that satellite was offering. I think it's a bit rich that we've got, and they're mostly Labor members, who are standing up here talking about rural this and rural that, and provincial this and provincial the other thing, and they talk about constituents coming to see them, and they relate these second-hand stories about the services that are provided in the provinces, holding it kind of out at arm's length as if it's some sort of distasteful thing that, well, we've heard about the countryside. We see documentaries about it on television from time to time, and every now and then an angry person from rural New Zealand will phone us up, and sometimes a scruffy one will come into our office and sing us a tale of woe about, you know, how terrible things are. And of course we sit there and smile and nod and smile sweetly and take these concerns on board at a distant academic level, because actually, you know, we don't live that. Well, people like me do live it. And I understand, you know, maybe the upper levels of the National Party have lost touch with the heartland, but there are plenty of members on the government side who still live in the rural areas, who still don't. They themselves experience these things. And so, look, I agree with my colleague Tracy Martin that it's a bit odd that here we are doing the government's work for them, but in actual fact, insofar as this is concerned, we agree with them entirely. I heard Ms Lee talking earlier about the plight of some travel writers, I think they were, who were having difficulty out in the rural, out in the cell phone black spot that's called rural New Zealand, trying to get a link for their Twitter. These things don't sort of mean anything to urbanites who understand them at an academic level, but of course here we've got connectivity. We've got cell phones. We've got cell phones that have got lots of bars on them all the time. We can go up to our offices and we've got high-speed broadband. They can go back to the hotel and they've got broadband. They can go back to their apartment, they've got broadband. They can go home to their urban electorates, to their urban electorate offices, and they've got all these things. And so they hear this sort of whining noise from people, "Oh, there's poor people in the country haven't got fast broadband," and talking highfalutin conceptual ideas about, well, we should have another review, and perhaps we should form a committee and look at things again. People in the provinces actually have had a gutsful of that, It's the provinces that earn this country's living. It's the provinces that create the wealth. And it's the provinces who are always on the rough end of the stick.
I call Kamaljeet Singh Bakshi.